The Family Health Podcast is brought to you in partnership with Things Happen, a trusted financial advisor that supports new parents and their families. Things Happen offer the best advice to help parents and their families make informed financial decisions, ensuring a secure and tax-efficient future for their children. The team at Things Happen are highly qualified financial experts who will guide you through the different types of policies to consider as your family expands, taking the stress out of decision making by finding the best deals for your needs, ensuring you and your family are protected no matter how busy life gets. If you already have life insurance, Things Happen will carefully review your existing policy to ensure that it still meets your family's evolving needs, so you know your family is fully protected. Hello, welcome. I'm Kate Ball and I'm the founder of Mini First Aid. Welcome to our podcast, Family Health by Mini First Aid. I'm so pleased that you've taken the time to listen to our podcast, because whether you're in the car, you're cleaning the house, or perhaps you're relaxing with that rare cup of tea, our Family Health podcast covers a huge range of topics that might affect one of your family members. And if you've ever got a family health concern and you're thinking, I'll just Google that, well, please don't. Have a listen to us instead. Our guest this week, I am delighted to welcome our guest this week. It's Lisa Blackwell, who is a youth mental health first aider with a specialism in solution-focused hypnotherapy and psychotherapy. Lisa is part of the Youth Fairy team who advocate a modern approach towards positive change for children and young people who are struggling with anxiety, stress, anger, and low confidence. She's joining us today to talk specifically about anxiety in children. So Lisa, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here, and I have my cup of tea all ready to go.
Amazing. Now, Lisa, I've been eagerly anticipating this podcast because I'm a mum of 6 children, as you will probably know, and my oldest 2 are already in secondary school, and I know just how much anxiety is taking its toll on our young people. So I'm really happy that you're joining us today. I'm dying to get going, but before we do, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and our listeners so that they know who you are and a little bit more about you?
Sure. So I am a mum of 3. I have got 2 adult children who, adult children, is that the right thing to say? They age me. They are 27 and 28. I have 2 grandchildren. My 2 boys were adopted, so I've experienced some of the challenges that parents might have, with children who are struggling a little bit, because they really did struggle. And then I've got my little surprise, so I've also got a 10-year-old daughter, and I live in West Sussex.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm busy. I've got a 9-year-old granddaughter and a 10-year-old daughter, so they have lots of fun together, and a
Amazing.
2-year-old grandson as well. So yeah, busy life. Here in West Sussex, and also running the Youth Fairy for Burgess Hill and Haywards Heath, having a nice sort of busy practice here, going into schools as well, helping parents and teachers, as well as working one-to-one with my clients in my therapy space here.
Great. Lisa, you sound like a very busy lady, and thank you for giving us your time today. It feels to me like anxiety is at epidemic proportions. It seems to be talked about in the media all the time. I know it's affecting so many families, and probably lots of the families listening today. What's the latest stats then around anxiety?
Do you know what? I actually made some notes, and now I'm like, where are they in front of me? Because numbers are not my thing. I think, here it is. I said there was a recent article in The Guardian, and it said 205,000 referrals, 23-24.
Wow.
If we think about the fact that's referrals, that's people who have gone as far as to go to the doctors and get a referral to some form of support. And that was, when I looked at the statistics, there was another statistic for sort of 2016 and 17, which, isn't that long ago, and it was around 3,000 referrals. So there's obviously a big change. And I think many people don't actually go to the GP because they're really aware of the mental health crisis that exists. And, unless there is a worry that, is quite significant, they often will look for support elsewhere before going to the GP.
So the numbers actually we would suspect would be greater than actually those already massive numbers.
Yeah.
Children then presenting with anxiety, this is presenting at a younger and younger age, is that right?
So my experience, I've been working, I'm part of a big organisation of the Youth Fairy, so I'm just one part of the Youth Fairy, and we've got other therapists up and down the country. My experience and the experience of my colleagues is that we are having inquiries that are as young as 5 around anxiety. Now, some of my colleagues
Wow.
are much more practiced at working with younger children than I am. I tend to say around 7. I will sometimes see a 6-year-old if I've had a chat with mum and I feel like they're able to kind of understand the way that we work. And we always will have a initial conversation with a child to see whether it sort of fits with the way that we work. But absolutely, we see, quite young referrals coming to us.
Now, this might be a difficult question to answer about the broad causes of anxiety, but have you got a grasp on what are these causes of this increase in anxiety?
There's a part of me that wonders whether some of it is actually our improved understanding of anxiety, that actually now we're
Okay.
more likely to recognize that in our children and to look for help because we're much better at talking about mental health. But I do, however, think that COVID has probably had a very big impact. And certainly the amount of children that come to see us that are linked with anxiety, that's probably our number one thing that children come to see us with. And I was doing some other reading as I do around sort of children's development. And if we think about children are supposed to develop some form of anxiety, if not develop, but have some anxiety, around kind of 2 and 3, they start to have that understanding that the world is bigger than just their little bubble. But if you think about
Okay.
COVID, we had children who, were going into that age and didn't learn that their bubble was bigger. Their bubble was
Gosh,
still very,
yeah.
very small. And then suddenly, for some of them, they went from that very small bubble to not going through some of the normal processes within their development into school, into being,
Right.
they've been with mum, dad, carer 24/7. And then suddenly they were having to cope with things that perhaps we, more gently took them into. I've spoken to my daughter's school and they said that um, year 6 now, they are noticing are much more immature than they would normally expect of a year 6, and they put that down to COVID. So I think there's a lot to do with that, and I think we probably can't, you know, mobile phones, technology, social media. I think all of those things are things now that certainly as children get a little bit older, um, school doesn't stop at school. That continues outside of school with phones and things. So I suspect there's some challenges there as well. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, so I think we live in a society now where we're much more aware of lots of things. So you think about some of the challenges that have happened in recent years. I can refer to my daughter. She's had 3 or 4 children in her class that have come and gone as a result of the Ukraine war. So that's coming very much into their awareness. So those concerns that can be generated there.
Do we, as a whole, need to be worried or concerned about this for our society, that we've got all of these influencing factors that are causing this rise in anxiety? I mean, is it something that we should now all be quite concerned about?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how qualified I feel to answer that one. But
Yeah.
as a mum and I suppose as a therapist working with children, I think again, like I said, I think there's some positives to be taken about of how aware we are now of mental health, of how parents want to have a better understanding, how there's some great books and resources and podcasts and available to us to help us to support our children. So I think that's particularly good. So I think we're better informed. Um, and I think being aware that, if we don't support our children to develop positive, good mental health, that there are greater impacts, as they go through life, developing friendships, coping with school, being resilient, all of those things suffer, I think. And if we have anxious, worried children, they're going to find it more difficult to cope with, the things that are normal.
Now, you mentioned previously, as we were chatting then, about the fact that children in their development have natural anxiety, and that typically from about 2, they start to realise that their world is bigger than them. And so we've got this anxiety piece. Where do we as a parent or a carer go, okay, what's normal anxiety and when do we need to go and get help? So what's the point for a parent or a carer where they need to go, actually, I think I need some help for my child?
I think there's a lot to be said that, generally we know our children best. So I think it's when we're seeing changes in behaviour. If you see a child who, was coping, quite well with things, and who is becoming tearful, finding it difficult to do things they used to enjoy, struggling with their sleep, complaining about headaches and stomach aches, um, you know, being focused on the negative things that are going on, that might give you some cause for concern. Um, and I think it's also when it's continual and it gets worse. I think that's also, our children it's natural to have worries. Our brains are created so that they keep us safe. So we see danger, we see worries, and we make an assessment. And if we are coping well, I talk to children about their brains quite a lot. In fact, we talk about it all of the time. It's kind of a basis of how we work is educating children to understand how their brains work so that they can understand that they can do things differently and positively influence their brains and their behaviors and the way that they cope. And we talk about their, especially with small children, being an upstairs brain and a downstairs brain. We talk about the intellectual brain and the primitive brain, the brain that's more like the cavemen. Um,
Yeah.
and children who are struggling get stuck in that part of their brain where they're not able to make a proper assessment. So that worry that maybe is attached to one thing, if they're in that part of their brain where they're able to make a good assessment, they're able to come up with solutions, they're still engaged with their ability to think positively, to have a conversation about it, then they're able to cope with that worry, they're able to see it through. And it's just, we all worry as adults. We worry, don't we? I was a little bit worried coming onto a podcast. We worry about new environments. We worry about jobs and all sorts of things that we worry about, but we cope with that worry and we experience it. We get through it. We might get a little bit of adrenaline, a little bit of cortisol, which takes us through. Actually gives us hyper focus. If we're going to do a test or something like that, that's really good for us to have, but it gets used up. We talk to children about there being a polar bear, actually, and adults too. If we were to
Okay.
step outside of your studio now and there was a polar bear in your garden, you wouldn't go into your intellectual brain and go, I wonder, Mr. Polar Bear, have you had breakfast? Are you tame? We don't want any of that. We want our brain to get us somewhere safe. And so the amygdala does its job. It checks and goes, big scary animal, let's get out of here. We get a lovely rush of adrenaline and cortisol, floods our body, gets us ready to run or hide, and we get ourselves somewhere safe. But sometimes our brain behaves like that, behaves like there's a polar bear when there isn't one.
Right. Okay. So that's a really good analogy for people to be thinking of, because I was going to say to you what's going on in individuals' brains when they're anxious. So it is that polar bear piece, isn't it, where you can't come out of this thinking that it's something really life-threatening
Yeah.
when perhaps it isn't. When you talk to children and young adults about the symptoms of anxiety, so what sort of things they experience, what sort of symptoms do they have with their anxiety?
Anxiety is an interesting one because often has some um, physical outcomes of it. So often we might have sort of that butterfly feeling in our stomach. We might actually feel sick. We might have stomach ache. We might feel ourselves feeling a little bit short of breath. We might feel a bit hot. Hands might be clammy. Certainly the heart rate feels like it's increasing. But we can also have headaches. We can also have tics and things like that can also come as a result of anxiety. Um, and and then sometimes I say there's things like not sleeping well, also are often a sign that we're suffering with some anxiety.
Okay. And I think for parents, we might sometimes do perhaps some unhelpful things where we just shut something off. So the phrase, don't be ridiculous. Don't be ridiculous. That's not going to happen to you. Or using that phrase, don't worry about it. Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Do you see that in parents? You know, that parents go, actually, I shut my child's anxiety down and perhaps I shouldn't.
I think quite often by the time they come to see us and we're talking to them about how their brains work, I don't normally hear very much of that, but of course we do all do it.
Yeah.
My daughter, it's funny, isn't it? When I do this all day with other children, but sometimes my daughter will tell everybody else how their brains work, but sometimes if I try to talk to her, she'll be like, yeah, don't want to talk about that, Mummy, thank you very much. And she sometimes has worries, and in my head sometimes I'm like, oh, come on, you're fine. But actually, it's become a worry to her. I think it can be helpful to understand how anxiety is created. Um,
Yeah.
our brain doesn't know the difference between imagined and reality. So imagine that your child's gone into school and perhaps, I don't know, maybe they put their hands up in class to answer a question and they actually have misheard the question, or they just said something funny and actually the class laughed. And quite a lot of our children, especially at younger ages, don't like being laughed at, do they? They're not
No.
at that place yet where they find, oh, you're laughing with me. It feels very much at me. So they're mortified. They come out of class, it's happened once, right? They put their hands up once, they had that response once, but they come out of class and maybe they're talking to their little friends and they're saying, oh, I can't believe that just happened. And the friend's saying, oh, yeah, you must be so embarrassed. Oh, I'm glad it wasn't me. And they're talking about it. And then they come out of school and the first thing you say is, how was your day? And they go, oh, Mummy, you can't believe what happened to me today. I put my hands up in class and everybody laughed at me. Oh, my goodness. And then they walk home and then maybe they speak to their older brother or sister, or they speak to a grandparent and they have the same conversation. Every time they're having that conversation, the brain is going click, 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 click on a little number thing. You know, the little number things you get that like go wind up the numbers.
Yeah. The
Happened
clickers. Yeah.
once, little clicker, happened once, now it's happened 11 times, 21 times. Our brain also negatively forecasts for the future. So they go to bed and they lie there in bed and they're like, I can't believe that happened. Oh my goodness, I can't believe, what if that happens tomorrow? I can't put my hand up tomorrow. It's happened 41 times, 51 times. So this one thing that happened once, and we do it too, adults, have a meeting and it goes terribly wrong and we go home and we talk about it. We created an anxiety, a worry. Now, if things generally in our life are going well, we probably cope with that quite well. Maybe the next day we go in and we notice that somebody else puts their hand up and it goes okay. Maybe we get the confidence to do it and we override it. But actually, if we are having what we call a full stress bucket, so if there's other things they're worrying about, maybe they've just started school, maybe they've got some friendship challenges, maybe you're moving house, maybe there's tests coming up, all of those things fill up their stress bucket. And when our stress bucket is full, we're more likely to be in our downstairs brain where we can't make a good assessment, and it starts to then become, and that's how it starts to build up. The more worried we are, the more we spend time in our downstairs brain not making a proper assessment. The more we don't make a proper assessment, the more we worry, the more we put in our bucket, and you can just see that negative
It's
cycle
this
starts to happen.
cycle. So if you're a parent and you are worried about your children's anxiety, where do you go for help? Is the GP the first place to go? What's the recommendation for a parent who's concerned about their child?
I think again, it's about that kind of your child best and that level of worry. So there are some great resources, like we're doing here. We've got something on our website that your listeners can go to that's a parent pad that's got lots of blogs around these things and some tips. So I think, feeling informed is really helpful, but absolutely, I think always, if you are concerned, I think we say this to parents from as soon as you have a baby or even while you're pregnant, don't you? You're like, you know best. If you're concerned, go and ask. We'd always rather you ask. GPs would always rather you ask. And then they can signpost you and give you some information. Schools are also quite helpful, to have a chat with school because you can find out what else is going on within the lessons, within the classes. So I think, there's lots of resources available, but absolutely, if you're concerned, do go speak to your GP.
Lisa, for a parent, sometimes we can ladle ourselves with guilt. So we feel that we may be responsible, or that we might have shut things down, or we may be responsible for the anxiety in the first place. Obviously, that's not helpful for us. That's almost feeding our own anxiety, right? Just listening to that cycle there.
Yeah, yeah,
But,
absolutely.
but it's tough. So what's your words of wisdoms for the grown-ups that are listening, that are
So,
sort of beating themselves up for their
yeah,
kids'
I
anxiety?
think my words of wisdom for the grown-ups are the same sort of words of wisdom as I would give for your children. So, if I give it to you for the children around how to support them, then you use that for yourself as well. So, I think I've already said, our brain's really good at looking at the negative bias that we're that's the primitive brain's not evolved. It wants to keep us out of danger. It's just that we don't have as much danger as we once did. Sainsbury's is pretty good at providing, and other grocery stores are available, providing our needs and everything. We don't have to do hunting and gathering and be on that high alert all the time. So one of the things is to help to create some more positive. We're really good. We don't need to practice being negative. We do that really easily, but practice being positive. So, that example I gave of coming out of school, rather asking, "How was your day?" As parents, if we just change that question to, "What was good today?" Our children
Okay, great.
start to think about, oh, the brain goes, oh, there's a filter here. What was good? What was good today? And you might find they find that difficult to start with. But what also happens if you regularly ask that question is their brain starts to look for the good. And actually what you start to do is create some rewiring in their brains. Our brains are more plastic than porcelain. They're moldable. And we have something going on called neuroplasticity. Children, teenagers in particular, really good at neuroplasticity. It's happening. It's the brain forming and creating all those synapses. Um, so if we can support them to think more positively, so asking them, what was good today? Really great question. Just a little change. Getting into the practice. I've been a youth fairy now for 4 years, I think, 3 or 4 years. And I quite quickly started doing with my daughter. We sat down for dinner and we started to say, what are 3 things that have been good today? She makes sure we do that without fail. And whether we've got a friend round, whether it's somebody else's house, whether we're in a restaurant, we always have that conversation at dinner time.
And it's just looking for good things. Yeah.
Yeah, just
Okay.
looking for good things. And how I said the brain doesn't know the difference between imagined and reality, and that we can negatively forecast. Well, we can also start to do that in a positive way too. So when we think about and remember the good things from our day, our brain doesn't know the difference between imagined and reality. It's like, oh, another good thing. It multiplies it, and it gives us that serotonin, that feel good chemical, and that feel good chemical helps us to spend more time in our intellectual brain. So it's such a small tweak. And we're not saying don't talk about problems. There are problems. But if we help our children to focus on the solution rather than the problem, so we start asking questions like, as you just said, don't say don't worry, but okay, that sounds really tough. I wonder if you could imagine that tomorrow or maybe next week that was better, what would that look like?
Okay.
And then what's one
Yeah.
thing we might be able to do tomorrow that might help us to move towards that?
Hmm.
Just those solution focused questions and conversations um, are really supportive. And if we start to do that with our children now, we're equipping them to create and develop those neuro pathways that will stay with them into their teenage years, into their adulthood. We're helping them to be resilient, more confident, and coping better is a really good thing. Actually, life does throw us curveballs. They're not polar bears, but we do come across days that are difficult. And actually, if we can help our children to cope better, then they're less likely to start creating that anxiety cycle.
Hmm. And do you think, with the children that perhaps you've worked with, without disclosing sort of any particular cases, but children where you've worked with, that you can re-engineer their brain so that they can manage anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one reason I love my job. Yeah, I mean, we've got lots and lots of testimonies of of children that come and see us. And the amazing thing is we see children for between 8 to 12 weeks. You know, we re-educate children. It's a psycho-education for them and their parents when they come to see us, helping them to understand the brain, picking up tools and techniques that they can take away with them. And it's not just kind of come and talk about your troubles, but it's like, okay, how would this be better? And they start to have that more solution focused mindset that, you know, in school they talk about growth mindset. You know, there's a similarity there about, you know, well, what can I do? We quite often focus on what we can't do, but what can I do? And they start to feel empowered in that. And absolutely. So to answer your question, yeah, I mean, I've seen so many of my clients who, you know, come to me really struggling. I've had a young lady who I was working with who, when she first came to see me, she couldn't even speak to me. She couldn't even look at me. Her hair was here, nothing from her at all. She wasn't going to school, it became a school avoidance thing. She's now at college. She
Wow.
started college. She managed to go into school and do her exams. She comes in now and sees me, and we're actually getting to the point where she's kind of really tailing off seeing me. But she comes and sees me. She comes in with a smile in her face. She looks me in the eye. You know, it's amazing to do what we do to help children.
I'm
You know,
sure there
really
will be
make
people
some
listening
different choices.
that, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm sure there's people listening that example there that you gave will give people real hope,
Yeah,
because I guess what you don't want is people that their children have anxiety or suffer from anxiety for a number of triggers. It
yeah.
might be that it's social media, it might be that
Mm,
it was lockdown or whatever that is, and almost parents thinking, well, that's it. This is they're just going to be my anxious child. That's
yeah.
that you can work with them to work through it.
Yeah, and you know, obviously, along with all of the different sort of challenges that we have with mental health, you know, there are different extremes, and some children, you know, have some real polar bears. I worked with a girl who came to see me for anxiety, and while she was with me, she had a bereavement. You know, that's a real polar bear in a young girl's life. And, you know, then it's difficult to deal with the anxiety because there's lots of stuff in that stress bucket. And so sometimes we work with young people for a longer period of time, and sometimes they might, you know, make some great improvements and then hit a bump in the road and come back and see us. More often than not, we don't. More often than not, it's 8 to 12 sessions. But, you know, there are occasions, and I suppose for, you know, if a parent has got a child who, you know, they've been doing some work and they feel like we're not making any head ground, you know, for some children it might take longer, and there are different reasons for that anxiety. And I think as well, you know, the longer they've been practicing, and I don't mean on purpose practicing, but, you know, subconsciously that behavior has been continuing, then creating those new neural pathways takes a little bit longer because the brain wants to go. We talk about sometimes being like a mountain with a ski slope, you know, and you've got that really great ski path that you go to. And to get that new neural pathway, you've got to trudge through the snow, and you've got to do it
Yeah.
over and over again. And it's hard to start with. And something happens in your life, and zhup, down you are, down that old pathway again. Again, as parents, we can recognize that happening too.
Lisa, I could talk to you all day. This is just absolutely fascinating. We always ask our guests when they come and talk to us on the Family House podcast to give us a takeaway. If you have people listening, or you have people listening now, who you want to have a takeaway from today's session, what is the one thing? It's probably impossible, Lisa, to say one thing around children's anxiety, but is there a thing, a thought that you would like to leave parents and carers today who are listening on children's anxiety?
Yeah, I think I haven't said 101 things, other things I would have liked to have shared with them. I think talking about what's been good is it's such a simple thing, but it makes such a big difference. And just being aware about things like, you know, good sleep hygiene, it makes such a big difference. Good eating makes a big difference as well. Getting out in nature, breathing well, really simple things.
Lisa, I'm absolutely thrilled that you were able to enjoy to join us today, and I've got the links. I've got the links to both your website and also the other areas that you've talked about today, and we'll put those in the podcast notes. So if people want more information, want to find out more about Youth Fairy, or want to make an appointment to chat to you, then they can do that, and also the other links and helpful pieces of advice for parents. Now, folks, if you're listening and you would like to know more, then obviously you can contact Lisa directly through our links, but also make sure you subscribe to the Family Health Podcast. The Family Health Podcast will give you every week a new updated piece of family health information, which will be fed through your social channels, but also our newsletter as well. And I've got one final request for you. If you have a family health subject that you would like us to cover, and you would like us to invite experts like Lisa to come and join us, please do get in touch. We would absolutely love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening. You've been listening to the Family Health Podcast. And just a little reminder from me and our sponsor, Things Happen, that if reviewing your life insurance is still on your to-do list, take time to get in touch with a Things Happen advisor today.